Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be talking about, how we can do right by Ohio's moms. And happy almost Mother's Day to all the moms out there. I'm Caitlin Johnson. I am the Communications Director for Policy Matters Ohio. I have a great panel today of moms and daughters and policy experts and organizers and doulas. And we're going to be talking about what we can do to make Ohio the best possible place for mothers and their children to thrive and flourish. So before I introduce the panel, we're just going to start off talking a little bit about just motherhood and what it means, what it's meant to us in our lives and our work. And I'll start off talking a little bit about my motherhood experience, because I have a mom and I am a mom and I'm a stepmom too, I should also add. And I think for sure, I can say almost with certainty that my mother, Eileen Johnson, who's out there watching, I hope, she is a retired history teacher. And I might have found it annoying as a kid, but everything I watched, everything I read was steeped in history, and it was about, the movement for social change and how we achieved a more just world, looking back through history. I actually, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about books she read me, and she read me these books called Value Tales, which are now out of print. And I went online and found some old ones and bought some. But it was like the value of helping, the Harriet Tubman story, or, all things that it took these historical figures and placed them in values. And I really think reading those things from a young age got me interested in work like this. And now, of course, I'm a mother, and without my mother, I don't know where I'd be. And without my mother-in-law, both of them help us take care of my son a couple of days a week, provide so much feedback and support. And of course, being a mom has made the stakes a little higher, I think, for me. There's something experiencing pregnancy, the vulnerability, the anxiety that comes with that, the physical toll it takes on you. That was a game changer for me. And it's hard to explain. I didn't understand it until I went through it. And so it gave me a new appreciation for all of the things that we're fighting for today and all the discussions we'll be talking about. And of course, when I personally had my son, it made my motivation even more intense to fight for a better world for all kids. So that's a little bit about how motherhood has influenced me and shaped me as a person. And next, I want to pass it to Wendy Patton. She's our Senior Project Director at Policy Matters. So Wendy.
Thanks, Caitlin. I think like you, Caitlin, I've spent a lot of my life trying to be like my mom and trying to be my mom. She was a librarian and a teacher and a journalist, and was just a wonderful role model. She helped me tremendously. Once my kids were in primary school. Before that, she was taking care of my dad, who was in bad health, but he passed, and she came and she helped us. And I just could not have survived without her. As much as I would like to look back on raising my kids as a time of, closeness and birthday parties and good family times, I do remember that. But finding time was just, I look back, I remember the struggle to find the childcare in the summer camp, the struggle to find time. I spend time now reading Heather Boushey, who is an economist who advises President Biden now. She wrote a book called Finding Time, and she talks about how in the 1970s, when the time of the Great Industrial Divide, when good jobs were hemorrhaging, there was thought at the national level, how do we bring more people into the workforce? There was a recognition that you needed work-life balance, you needed universal child care, and there were proposals that never went forward. There's so much to do to improve the lives of mothers these days. Some of the ideas in the 70s are still very badly needed. And my mother was she had the greatest insight and was the most outspoken on what women need in order to work. And that was a support to me throughout.
Oh, thank you so much, Wendy. And Kelly. We also are joined by Kelly, and I'm going to butcher your last. Oh, Vyzral, like, okay, Vyzral, Kelly Vyzral. Sorry, Kelly. Kelly from Children's Defense Fund, Ohio.
Thanks, Caitlin. That one gets everyone, so don't feel bad. Yeah, I too have a mom, and I am a mom. And the one thing that I always appreciated about my mom was just the time she took to make things special. She, we were fortunate enough, and at the time when I grew up, she didn't have to, she didn't work. She was a mom that stayed at home. She had 6 kids, so that kept her busy enough. She didn't need another job. She had 6 jobs at the time. So, but she always made things very special and very individual for each of us. And that's something that, when I had my kids, I tried to do. And when they were young, she was always there. She, would just offer, can I come and get them and take them home with me? Can they spend 3 days at my house? Yes, of course they can. I'm very lucky to have had that resource. But, being a mom has been, it's like, at the same time, and I don't know how this all happens, but it's exhilarating, it's terrifying, it's confusing, it's all of those things at once, and all at the same time. Even I used to think that my parents had this grand game, this grand scheme, and they knew exactly what they were doing, and everything they did had a purpose. And now I realize that they were flying by the seat of their pants, just like I do every single day. They just held it together. I think they had a good game face. And now my daughters are older, and it's lovely, and it's, still all of those things, but also like having 2 really good friends. So I enjoy it every single day.
Oh, thank you so much. And Erin Ryan of the Women's Public Policy Network.
Hi, everyone. I see bits and pieces of my mom in all of your stories. I love just hearing people gloat and talk about their moms and motherhood themselves. So I'm not a mom myself, but I know that I have an amazing role model if and when that does happen for me and my family. My mom was someone who made motherhood look effortless. I think in the same way that Kelly talked about it, I look back on my childhood, and I think, she had 3 girls, all within a few years of each other. And I don't know how she managed it, because she was also the resident mom for so many kids in our neighborhood. She was also someone who worked until she had my youngest sister, their 3rd kid. And she talked about how something, preparing for this conversation, I talked with her, and I just kind of shared, she's always interested in my work. She really instilled that idea of social justice and the ideals that I still hold today. And she talked about her own experience of taking, I think she said 3 months of paid leave with my older sister and with myself. But then she also had a year of unpaid leave that she could take from her workplace. And just thinking about how that shaped her ability to provide for us in those early months. And then it got to the point where with 3 girls, like Kelly said, that was a full-time job. So just kind of thinking about the way that my mother really shaped my image of what a strong woman is and what a mother is. And then just shaping those ideals that I really fight for and continue to work towards today in my role with the Women's Public Policy Network. So I'm just excited to dig into this conversation today, and just thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much, Erin. So Jess, we have Jess Vallejo from Sacred Spaces 216. And again, I am sorry if I mispronounced your last name. Please correct me if I did.
That's fine. It is a very hard one to say. Vallejo is complicated. It took us a long time to learn how to say it. Yeah, it's nice to be here. So fun to hear all of your stories. My mother, Olga Vallejo, I'm originally from Toledo, and she worked there with the Board of Elections for a long time. She retired from there. And so being involved in watching the way that legislation changes, the world that we live in, and socially, and advocacy has been also a way that I was birthed into the birth work world. I mean, becoming a doula, my mother just cared for people. And as a caregiver, we were raised in a family that's very communal and very supportive. And we all sort of had a baby when one of us had a baby. An aunt had a baby or sister had a baby. Everybody's having a baby. So being a doula is really neat to come full circle and to support my family in that way too now. It's really important as a emotional support and a physical support person that a doula is available for women in pregnancy. I myself went through what would probably be called a crisis pregnancy by all standards, being that I birthed alone as a single mother in the hospital. And it was quite traumatic and definitely led to me becoming a doula because of that experience and revealing how important it is that from the moment a birthing person comes in through the door, that they're supported in a way that's personal and guided and definitely culturally competent and respectful. So, yeah.
And so
celebrate Mother's Day with all of you.
Thank you. And could you gave a bit of a definition, but could you just like give folks like a one sentence, like what is a doula? Because there are people out there watching probably who don't know what it is or what it means.
Right, sure. So a doula is an emotional support and comfort person, someone who's there before, during, and after labor and in childbirth. They could be postpartum support also, and they can provide information. They can give you guidance. They can offer support in giving you information to help you make guided, informed decisions, and help you advocate for yourself in the birth room and with your provider, with your care provider, midwife, or your doctor.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're going to hear from Kalesha Scott. She's an organizer with the Ohio Student Association, but she's also going to be talking about her personal experience with pregnancy and I think working with a doula.
Yes, thank you. Like she said, I'm Kalesha Scott. I'm actually currently right now 8 months pregnant, almost 9. In the last stretch of this, and definitely having a doula helped me because my mother lives in Arizona, so she's like 3 days away from me. So that's definitely been hard. And then my partner's mom lives in Columbus, and I'm in Dayton. So it hasn't been too much of a support. And it's like sometimes I don't feel comfortable asking questions because I feel like they silly. So I just be like, okay, I'm just going to keep it to myself. But the first few months I didn't get a doula because it was expensive. And I didn't know if it was like worth it at that time. We were trying to like buy a house. And like get cars and different things. So it was like a expense I really couldn't afford at the time. But during my second trimester, that's when it got kind of harder. And not having that support was just not feasible at that moment. So I just took the leap and did it. And it's probably the best decision I made. I call my doula. I can call her at any time, ask her any questions. Like if it's a new feeling I'm not used to, or if my ankles is too swollen and just want to make sure everything is okay. So I definitely think it's very important, but it's something that a lot of women and families aren't able to do because they can't afford it. And the doulas deserve to be paid what they're asking for because they do a lot. Available literally 24/7. Like Jen talked about, they do postpartum as well as during your labor and before. So it's definitely worth the money, but I definitely think that that's something that the government should try to help low income mothers, especially new mothers, be a part of something like that. Because I think a lot of times that would help with our low infant rate as well as the maternal rate that we have in Ohio that's very high as well. But thank you again.
Oh, thanks. Thank you, Kalesha. I can totally relate to the feeling silly asking questions. I had so many questions while I was pregnant, and I was so nervous about so many different things. And I was a bit of an older mom too, so I was constantly worried that this might be wrong or that might be wrong. And wanted, sometimes didn't ask questions because I felt like I was a bother or annoying. So, like I could see why would have been so great to have a doula who I knew I could count on for that. And that's what she was there for, So thanks everybody for, sharing your reflection about why you do this work and how it relates to your experience with motherhood, or through through what you learned from your own mom. So what I wanted to hear from everybody is what is your vision? Like, what do you think we need? What do we need in Ohio for our moms who, are such critical, play such critical roles in our lives to have the best possible life and be the best, be supported to be the best possible moms that they can be? What are you envisioning for Ohio moms? What do you think we need?
I'd be happy to start off. Working in the maternal and infant health space, my perfect world for, every woman giving birth would be that as Kalesha and Jess pointed out, that if they want it, they should have access to a doula. We know that toxic stress in a woman's life really does affect her pregnancy. It affects her birth outcomes. It affects the low birth weight, premature birth, all of those things, infant mortality. So, having a doula reduces that toxic stress in a woman's life and makes her feel heard. It also, as Kalesha pointed out, makes you feel comfortable asking questions about things you're feeling, which you shouldn't ever hide, but especially when you're pregnant. If you have a feeling or you think something is wrong, you should always feel comfortable asking that question, and a doula can help with that process. The other thing is a 12-month postpartum coverage under Medicaid. We know that more than half of the deaths that occur in pregnant women after they give or during or after pregnancy happen in that first year after they give birth. Ohio coverage for a pregnant woman only lasts 60 days. And if you're not on the ball, that's not even, that's one visit to an obstetrician or back to your gynecologist. And a lot of things happen. A lot of physical health issues can come up. A lot of mental health issues can come up. And if you don't have access to health care, you end up with what we have here in Ohio right now, which is one of the worst maternal mortality rates in the country. So that would be my perfect world for women giving birth.
Thanks. And in Ohio, we have a high infant mortality rate, and we have a high maternal mortality rate. And it is especially stark, the difference along racial lines, which is another just horror on top of an already bad situation.
Black women die at a rate 3 times or 2.5 times that of white women, and Black infants die at a rate of 3 times that of white infants. So it's that spectrum between there has grown 26%. I mean, you see that white mortality going down, but you see the Black mortality going up in both cases.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that way, right, Wendy?
Oh, no. There are states in this nation, California and Vermont, where maternal mortality is so low that it doesn't even register on the scale. The most recent measure we have showed that 11.5 maternal deaths per 100,000 births. That's for white women. For Black women, it was 29.5. This is totally unacceptable. Public policy and public programs can absolutely have a bearing on reducing maternal mortality to a negligible level, and we should be doing the same for infant mortality as well. These are the great shames of the state of Ohio, that the state of Ohio has in some neighborhoods and some cities infant mortality rates that are much higher than many developing countries. This is a highly productive state with great wealth in it. Our lawmakers need to make sure that mothers and babies live to their first birthday and live through that first tough year after childbirth. That's really a first priority. But, hearing Kelly talk and hearing my other colleagues here talk reminds me that we're surrounded by this fragile external infrastructure that we may not know as we go into having kids, but it reminds me how important the people around you are in giving you information. The nurses in the hospital, the doula is critical as you're pregnant. After you have a child, as you get into childcare, I learned everything I know about childcare from the childcare workers. My mother was not around either when I had little babies. I didn't know how to dress them. I didn't know much of anything. The childcare workers taught me everything I knew. They were critically important. In Ohio, they're so low paid. Childcare is so expensive for so many people. The infrastructure that supports us in our delicate work-life balance, our delicate and overburdened work-life balance, needs to be more firm and strengthened. And the doula and better guarantee of health care for those 12 months after you first give birth is a critical element of that.
Yeah, what would that look like, Jess? What would that look like for having new moms or pregnant moms supported? What would that mean, do you think?
Well, we know there are some birth traditions intact in other parts of the world that, they hold sacred the first 40 days after giving birth, and that this time is so important to aiding and healing of the mother and to the bonding that needs to take place and to supporting breastfeeding and everything that happens that fourth trimester. So being able to dignify and support a person postpartum to give women access to healthcare that would be restorative. Creating wellness spaces that are welcoming of families. One of the things that we did with Sacred Spaces in our inception was we incorporated that families would be able to bring their child in if they did need to get care. In this case, postpartum care. Often they would bring their baby with them to their service, and they could get postpartum care. We had childcare right there in the facility available for them. So giving families access to complete wellness care in communal spaces. I think that's part of it.
Oh, thank you so much. And Kalesha, you're about to be a new mom. What's your vision? What do you think Ohio needs for moms?
I definitely agree with what everybody else is saying. Different policies, especially supporting doulas for being paid through Medicaid, as well as just different legislation. But for me, us having something getting legislation out here that is working towards bringing down the maternal and the infant rates as well, just because it's scary, especially being a Black woman and having a Black child is just kind of all the odds that's kind of stacked against you, and all the different things that you kind of have to worry about when delivering, whether you are going to experience preeclampsia, whether you might have to do a C-section or something along those lines. Just kind of really feeling secure, because that's been my biggest thing during this whole process, is just being scared. One, scared because I'm about to be a new mom and don't know what I'm doing, and then just scared of what can happen to me or my child. So definitely having that support is important, because for the new moms, we don't know. People that has 2-3 kids, they're like, oh, this is normal. This is not normal. Let me take my child to the hospital. Or, oh, he gonna be okay. He'll work through it. I don't know. I'll probably be the one bringing my kid to the hospital every 2 seconds because I don't know what's going on, and I don't want to have him go through something because I was too late taking him to the hospital. And I probably watched too many medical shows, so I'll be too scared. But just having that type of support, definitely the doulas, I think that's for me, is very, very important. And just the healthcare system in general, being more alert and compassionate towards Black women when we are delivering, because I think that's kind of goes into it as well. A lot of times a lot of doctors and nurses just don't believe Black women when they are saying that they experiencing this pain or their child is going through something until it's too late. And I think if we are a lot more compassionate in our healthcare as well as in the legislation, it can all work together so that people are surviving and babies are surviving.
Yeah, and what one of the things that comes to mind for me, you talk about healthcare providers not always, they might not even mean it, right? But they just have this internalized bias, like Serena Williams, right?
Yeah.
You know, probably one of the most wealthiest women out there, you know, famous, whatever. But she had a pre-delivery scare, I believe, a blood clot, I believe, that almost cost her life, and she had a tough time breaking through and getting folks to take her situation seriously, it's just unbelievable. But I also related a lot to what you said about just like being nervous. I mean, I called poison control, I think, because like my son might have like maybe got Neosporin in his mouth when he was like, I was totally just like high anxiety all the time. Like, oh, it's stressful. I mean, it's really stressful that first, you know, few months. You got a new baby, especially if you haven't done it before, and your hormones are just going crazy. And so like that kind of brings up a lot of the things that we talked about with Erin's policy area that she's focused on, paid leave. Like you need this time, right, to figure it out and kind of like recalibrate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We really envision with the Women's Public Policy Network a place for all women where they can live economically secure, safe, and healthy lives. And paid family leave is one of those critical policies that really touches so many things and so many parts of someone's life. And we know it is, you know, there's no magical policy that will create, you know, this environment that helps all mothers thrive. But we know paid leave is one of those bridge policies that really connects to, you know, strong maternal health outcomes, being able to access childcare, being able to remain in the workforce. And so we realize that, you know, the United States is the only developed nation in the world that does not guarantee some form of paid family and medical leave for people. And that's outrageous. We can see the way that it has a fundamental ability to change people's lives. It allows them to take, you know, for mothers to take that time, and fathers, you know, for us to talk holistically about people of all genders and what that means to have an inclusive, gender neutral policy for folks. So being able to take that time after the birth, adoption, or fostering of a child to heal for the mother, to bond, to rest and recover. There's data that shows that 1 in 4 mothers in the US returns to work within 10 days of giving birth. And that is shameful. That is outright shameful, and it is wrong. And so if we look at a policy like paid family medical leave, if, you know, I think another piece of this is for the sandwich generation, which it's traditionally women, traditionally mothers who are taking on that care for other family members. So taking care of their own kids, but also taking care of aging parents or aging relatives. And so a holistic policy that provides that parental leave, that personal medical leave if they themselves have a medical issue they need to address, and that caregiving leave so that they can take care of other folks in their family is really a critical policy that we need. There's been bills introduced, multiple GAs in the Ohio legislature, and, you know, just the disconnect between what our policymakers see as important and what our mothers and our families actually need is really holding us back from seeing that vision of all mothers who can, you know, not just survive, but thrive here in Ohio.
So we know that moms need, you know, support during and after pregnancy. We know that they need time to take care of their new baby. They need time to heal after giving birth and during other times, whether it's caring for a loved one. You're like, this is what we need as a society, and we need to make sure people don't pay a price for that. They can't they can still get by. They can still put food on the table, pay the bills, aren't losing income. And we know that we need community support. If we want to be able to work, we need people that can care for our children, and we feel confident in that. So we know all these things that moms need. So what's holding us back in Ohio? Why don't we have them if we know the answers?
Legislative will. I mean, that's part of the problem. We have been approaching Ohio's legislature for 10 years now to try to get the eligibility for support in the public child care program lifted. It's harder to get assistance with the high cost of childcare in Ohio than in 48 other states. A mom with 2 kids making about $28,000 is eligible. A mom with 2 kids making $29,000 cannot get any assistance with the high cost of childcare. And for an infant, the cost of childcare can be exorbitantly high. Can be $900, $1,000 a month or more, and for a toddler, it can take up half of a woman's salary. That keeps lots of women out of the regular labor market. That's a cost to everybody, particularly to the young family. As a result, young families often struggle financially. One of the biggest helps to me when I had young kids 30 years ago was there was a big federal child tax credit, which was a tremendous help to us at tax time. The American Rescue Plan provides a boost to the child tax credit, makes it refundable. This will be critically important to families and there's just a whole lot we need to do to boost the financial capabilities of young families. And you can do that by supporting women so they can work.
Absolutely. And you talked a little bit about the legislative will. Can you explain that, or can somebody explain that to me? We're talking about very common sense ideas that it's just make sure people have support. It takes a village, all that, very old sayings. What's going on there? Where's the disconnect?
In terms of childcare, we should be providing assistance to people up to at least 200% of poverty. In Ohio, self-sufficiency kicks in at about 260% of poverty in most cities. In Ohio, we should raise our assistance to families for the high cost of childcare to families earning no more than 200% of poverty. That's about $42,000 a year. It costs the state money, but the state has given big tax cuts to the wealthy and to corporations. And so legislators do not want to pay for that kind of assistance for struggling families. And I think that's this prioritization of tax cuts instead of services and assistance people need is holding us back. That's one area. There are others that Erin touched on.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of jump in and add to that. I think, the policies that we care about as an organization are really all ingrained in that idea of applying that intersectional gender justice lens of thinking about how are women impacted, especially thinking about those different identities women hold of women of color, women in low income jobs, women in different parts of the state, women. So that lens is just not being applied by many of our lawmakers. I think that personal experience, the studies showing when women are in office, when they hold elected office, they're more likely to bring their own personal experiences into the conversation and into policymaking. And there is that disconnect. There are, our legislature is leaning very male, very white, a lot of older folks who are in power. And so just not having that personal experience or even the ability to put yourself in those shoes of folks, it really holds us back from having the kind of policies that people need. And I think being able to have our voices heard at the State House can be very difficult. We're in a pandemic and there's no virtual testimony.
Mhm.
There's no opportunities to give that. For folks who are working, who live outside of Central Ohio, you have to take an entire day off, find childcare, get off of work, have transportation. There's all these limitations to being able to have our lawmakers who maybe don't experience these things themselves hear from their constituents, and especially from women and mothers and caregivers. And I think that's a huge barrier in our ability to have the kind of policies that people really need. And it's something that I hope, things like this, events like this, where we can speak to folks and share stories and just really make that case. I hope that changes, the status of legislation moving forward.
Absolutely. And Jess, like, what are you seeing, in the community? Like, what's the disconnect between this vital work that we have to do to support moms and why it's not happening?
Well, I think it is happening some places. So we just need it to be happening at a grander scale, and we need support to be able to do that more effectively and efficiently as a birth worker community. For example, Birthing Beautiful Communities in Cleveland, Ohio is a community-based doula group that was birthed out of the community's need for doulas within the community to serve their own populations. Honestly, moms are resilient, and we know that, generationally, we have found ways to survive and support each other. So we do have the ability to tap into those communal networks and elevate and amplify those stories and the processes that they've already been able to accomplish and make successful. Birthing Beautiful Communities is absolutely impacting the infant mortality rate here in Cleveland. And it's a tremendous effort in a very short period of time. So there's a lot of reflection that can be done on that while they are doing this work, they're doing all of this heavy lifting by themselves, and having more support, having, for example, inclusive training and doula training at this point. Certification is privately done, and all of these places don't offer the same training. They don't offer the same education, or some of them don't even offer competency in the way of diversity and inclusion. So it's incomplete, and we aren't able to offer support. Some doulas are under skilled at this point. And in comparison, we have Birthing Beautiful Communities, who has seen a need grow from within the community, fulfilled that need, and now is able to say that they have results because of their work. And I think that's where we can invest in that gap, in growing with those communities and showing them that, yes, we do know that these disparities exist, and instead of allowing them to continue, we're going to invest in the communities that are doing this work themselves.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it's so good to be reminded again that we have models out there that we know work, that are doing the work, that we can show. We have evidence here to show the difference that can be made in people's lives. It's just a matter of priorities. What are we going to prioritize? I have something I wanted to answer my own question, actually, about what's holding us back in Ohio. Just a little note, because right now I know there is a Twitter storm going on. So if folks are paying attention, it's a bunch of folks are opposing a bill called Senate Bill 17, which would hurt moms and would hurt families, because it would literally take food off of people's tables by adding a whole bunch of new reporting requirements and all sorts of different metrics that folks need to fill out or adhere to just to simply get food to eat. And we know that, food aid makes a difference in families' lives. It has positive outcomes for kids, it has positive outcomes for moms. So I just wanted to plug that legislation like that, Senate Bill 17, that is like steeped in racial dog whistles about who's deserving of food and medical care and who's not. That's a piece of legislation that I would argue is holding Ohio back from having a state where all moms can thrive and flourish. So I just wanted to throw that out there, little detour. But yeah, so Kelly, Kalesha, what are your thoughts about this? Like, what are the barriers that we're seeing and that you think could be torn down?
Yeah, I definitely think I agree with what Wendy and everybody said, but I also think like live streams and panels like this is important because kind of what Erin spoke about, it's hard for us to get to the state house, and then it's especially with COVID, with all the different restrictions and everything, and just people not having the ability to get off of work and go up there. I definitely think seeing stuff like this, whether it's live streams, whether it's just Twitter posts, like you spoke about them speaking about Senate Bill 17, because we all know that legislators now are on Twitter and social media way more than what they was in the past. Like Mike DeWine posts on Twitter every day to update the state. So I definitely think like social media and getting that out and showing legislators that this is important to every Ohioan and not just a certain group. I think that's very important to show because a lot of times I think that they believe their constituents don't care or it don't affect them because like they don't have that dialogue to see what's going on with the people that they're supposed to be representing.
And I think as a state and particularly, you know, people in a position of power like lawmakers need to start listening to what Black and brown women are saying. I think that they've been telling us for years what the problems are. The whole community has been telling us what the problem is. We just haven't been listening. And I think they need to start really interacting and really listening to what these communities are saying and really, you know, setting aside their feelings and setting aside their, you know, implicit, you know, their biases that they may hold that they don't even know they hold, and just have an honest conversation. And you know, we've been speaking a lot recently with a group here in Columbus, much like Birthing Beautiful Communities. It's called Root, Restoring Our Own Through Transformation. And you know, one of the things that they say many times when we talk is, you know, they just want us for our data or for our information, but they don't want us to be a part of the conversation. You know, they call, they pick our brain, they want to, you know, they want to know what we know about it, but then they don't make us part of the conversation. And I think that's really important that that Black and brown women are added to this conversation and that we actually listen to what they have to say.
Absolutely. It's like the humility to admit there are things that we don't know as white folks, right? And be like open to, you know, there might be an experience that's different than our own. And like that experience is real and let's learn from it. Absolutely. It's so critical to listen. And it's infuriating that, you know, in 2021, there are still a lot of folks who are just unwilling to do so, despite the reams and reams and reams of evidence showing that something needs to change, right? But we know, you know, that's what we're here. That's why we're here today, to talk about things that can change. And we know that we can do it. Like it is possible. There is we can have a better world. We know, like Jess has talked about a lot of the practices and the programs that can make that world better. We have seen evidence. We know what having well-paid professionals caring for our children so we can work. We know what that does for families. We know what that does. We know what paid leave does. So what do we all need to do? Like, how can we get this? How can we make this happen?
You know, one thing we can do is the state budget is going through, and there are recommendations on the table to certify doulas, to standardize the training and certify them so that they can be covered under Medicaid. Their services can be reimbursed by the Medicaid insurance program, which is the largest single payer of insurance in the state, serving a quarter of Ohio's people. Getting the budget bill to include certification of doulas and funding to provide these services through the state's Medicaid program is one critical thing that needs to happen. Our legislators need to hear about it. Another thing the American Rescue Plan offers is it will provide federal funding toward the 12 months, a full year of coverage after a woman gives birth. Legislators need to embrace this very small expansion of Medicaid to make sure that every new mother in Ohio who has a child gets a full 12 months of health care after that birth. It's in this budget bill. Having your legislator hear from you on these kinds of things makes a difference. Legislators really care about hearing from their constituents. So that's one thing we can do about really the most important problem in Ohio, solving the infant and maternal death problem.
Absolutely. Thanks, Wendy. And Erin, what about moving paid leave across the finish line?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So I think, as I shared earlier, there have been bills introduced for the last 6 years. Lloyd in Cleveland has really been a champion on that issue. And she plans again to introduce a bill this upcoming session. And so we're just continuing to do that community building around the issue at the State House. I think storytelling is incredibly important, as we've shared throughout this conversation. But I also want to take us to the federal level for a second there. There's a lot of momentum happening in Congress around paid leave. We saw with the pandemic, people recognizing how important paid sick days and paid leave are. And Congress enacted a series of emergency paid leave that were specifically tied to the coronavirus pandemic. But in President Biden's American Families Plan, he became the first president to call in the United States to call for a national paid family and medical leave policy. And it's a robust policy. It covers parental leave, caregiving leave, that personal medical leave. It also covers safe leave for domestic violence and sexual violence, and then bereavement leave. And so it is a robust plan. It has good wage replacement for workers. So we know the lowest wage workers can continue to take that leave without having the financial strain that has on their families. And we know that there's an opportunity for us, as this recovery package and rebuilding package moves through Congress, to enact a paid family and medical leave policy for everybody in the United States. And that would be game changing. That would be transformational for mothers and for families and for children. And so I think paying attention to what happens as that legislation moves through Congress, calling your lawmakers, both in the State House to talk about what paid leave means for you here in Ohio, but also your federal lawmakers. And again, that storytelling is so critical. And so I'm going to plug something on our website that we do around storytelling, womenspublicpolicynetwork.org/paid leave. We really work with folks here in Ohio to share their stories with media, through events, with lawmakers. And I think that's a really important step. If you care about this issue, if you care about what that means for families, we just really urge you to get involved and to work with us to share your story and what that would mean for you and your family.
Thank you. Yeah, I shared mine a few years ago. And Jess, what about, how can people support organizations that work with doulas? You mentioned Birthing Beautiful Communities, or what can folks out there do in their own community?
Yeah, so Birthing Beautiful Communities is just one that I like to talk about because they're here in Cleveland and love to support them. But doula support, creating accessibility for more doulas of color, for people who are bilingual. Bilingual doulas are needed everywhere. As I may not have mentioned before, but I know that I often talk about, we have a changing population in Ohio with the migrant farm worker seasons, that we know. My family has a direct history to, my father was born in a migrant camp. As my family traveled north from Texas, and by the grace and kindness of the midwife locally, he was born safely. But we have to consider all of these populations and language skills, and doulas who have cultural competencies, creating space for this in the doula community and the education, creating access for that education in these community-based situations, but also broadening the spectrum of what the service of what a doula looks like. It's very important that people understand what a doula is a medical support person, that we do not in any way involve ourselves in the medical process. We're there. I like to tell people, I can be as close as you want me to be as your best friend or your sister, or it can be as simply as a business relationship. So finding a balance for moms and giving them access to care and support that they can find a personal connection to is important in sustaining that relationship, in the creating that bond and that security, that confidence, then they go into parenting, right? That's really what we hope to do, is to create a bridge between when the mother is birthed. I like to say when the baby is born, the mother is birthed, because now what do we do? And there's all of those questions, like you said. And so if we know we have a doula there from the beginning who we trust and they care, and there's a relationship and a bond, that can carry on into health and wellness for that child as well. And so doing that in these populations that we already know are being inflicted on this way, that we have these disparities in the care, creating a bridge by allowing them to create those care structures like Birthing Beautiful Communities has done, and educate these communities from within to support themselves.
Thank you so much. Any final thoughts, Kelly and Kalesha?
I will just put a plug in for House Bill 142, which is a doula bill introduced by Representatives Brinkman and Representative Crawley. And so this piece of policy has actually kind of two pathways into law. One would be the budget, which would be quicker and more, would be more expedient, but we can also do this the other way, and that is House Bill 142. So if anyone out there is interested in, calling their legislator and talking to them about this issue, that's another point that they can mention.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, just thank everybody on this call. But I definitely wanted to lift up what Erin was talking about around the paid leave, especially for the paternal. Cause just for my partner, he doesn't have paid leave for the baby. He has to use his sick days and vacation days if he want to take any time off. And he's a middle school teacher, so definitely something that should be changed. And I definitely think that's something we should lift up, along with Wendy was talking about around the doula bill, and trying to get those different things into the budget. But I just want to thank everybody for letting me be on this call, and thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks everybody so much for taking the time. And for the folks that are watching us online, check out the links that we've put in the chat. That will give you a lot of different resources, but mostly have a great Mother's Day. If you're a mom, if you know a mom, if you like a mom, if you love a mom, enjoy your weekend and take care of each other and take care of your moms, and let's make Ohio a state that takes care of our moms too. So bye everyone. Thank you.